Hi.
Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are brand new here, my name is Nikki and this is my book nook. Hi, hello, how are you? I owe you guys some answers. I've owed you guys some answers for a very long time now. I published my debut novel about a month ago now, and ever since I first started even whispering about the idea of publishing a novel, saying that I had written one, I have gotten countless questions about it, about writing a book, about, you know, finishing it, publishing it, the writing process, just everything that goes into it. You guys have left so many comments, sent me so many messages, asking me so many different things, and I've been planning to do a video on this for a while now, but I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to talk about. I didn't know if I wanted to do a Q&A, so I'm sorry, but I'm here now and I'm going to try to answer every single question that I've gotten from you guys. I think I'm gonna spend this first video just talking about the writing process, like physically writing the book, how I did it, how I managed to make this dream come to life. I have literally dreamed of writing a book for my entire life. Like, I think it was the second or the third grade the first time that I literally was in the library just like looking at all the books on the shelf, and I was like, I want to make one of these. I want a book that I can physically hold in my hand, a story that I created that just came from my brain and that can maybe bring some people some joy. Like, it has literally been an absolute dream of mine, and I've started so many books over the course of my life, but this is the first one that I have actually finished and has come to fruition, and it's a dream come true. It still doesn't feel real. I can't believe we're here. It's very strange, but yeah, I just want to put a little disclaimer now to say I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form. I'm just going to be talking about what personally worked for me and maybe offering some tips and advice for what maybe will work for you if you're someone that has also dreamed of writing a book for a long time, that has started books but has just never been able to finish one. I'm just gonna give you my little tips and tricks and things that worked for me. But yeah, I think I'm just gonna talk about the physical writing of the book in this video, and then I will make a whole separate video on the process of publishing, because if I tried to talk about both in one video, we'd be here for like 2 hours, and I don't want to do that to y'all. So yeah, I don't really have a plan or any rhyme or reason to what I'm about to say, but I'm gonna try my best. Let's get into it. So I think I need to start with just the most basic level of writing a book, right? Which is going to obviously be like what the book's about, the idea for the book, what that means, what you're planning on writing, planning, outlining, all those things. I think that is kind of a good place to start. This topic has always been something that's difficult for me, because I think that's really the hardest freaking part about writing a book, is simply just starting. And I'm gonna say this over and over and sound super repetitive in this video, but you can want to write a book, you can think about it, you can, you know, think you have an idea, but until you just start doing it, you're seriously not gonna know. So I think that is one thing just right off the bat to say is so important, is finding that balance between planning and just doing. And I think that's where I've really struggled in the past, is there's so many books that I got an idea for and I just immediately went and I just started writing it from like page 1, chapter 1, word 1. I'm like, let me just start writing this book. And you know, I started really fast and I'd get through like a chapter or two, and then I'd just burn out because I didn't plan anything for it. I just had like an initial sort of concept and then maybe like an opening scene or idea, and I didn't sit down and plan it at all. And I'm like, let me just start and I'm gonna write this book and it's gonna be great. So you get like a few chapters in and then you're just like, I don't know what to do, and then you abandon it. I definitely have done that so many times in my life. Like, I can't even tell you. I have so many documents like stored in my computer of things that I've started over the years that just went nowhere, and still I like look back on them now and I'm like, I don't even know where I was going with that. I have no freaking idea. It just started with a very basic idea and that's all you did. Some people are big planners, and I think this is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum of people that overplan. And I have also done this in my life for sure. Just books in the last like couple of years that I've tried to write, where, you know, you have this big idea, maybe you have like one particular scene in mind and you just want it to be a big thing, and you put like so much pressure on it that you're like, okay, I need to plan out every part of this. Like, you get so lost in the sauce of like, I need to outline every chapter and know the flow of the entire story, and you don't let yourself just write. Like, I have a book that still is like in the process right now that I honestly don't think I'll ever finish, because I'm not even lying. I think I spent 6 or 7 months just planning it, like calling my friend, asking her opinion on certain things, and like, does this make sense? Does that make sense? Like, trying to outline the story. And like, I never actually put pen to paper or hands to keyboard, whatever you want to call it. And that's really the difference. And I feel like that's what makes a book happen is when you find the balance between those two things, and that's what I really think was the difference with this book. I'm gonna sound really annoying because a lot of people have asked me, like, how did you come up with the idea for this book? Like, where did it come from? And I'm a person that loves to ask that question too, right? Any book that I love, I'm like, oh my God, how did an author come up with this idea? Like, I'm so curious. Like, I just think it's fascinating to know people's brains and their processes, right? And when it comes to this book, I feel like I'm all over the place, but let's just roll with it. I really was inspired to write a book that had time jumps in it. That is one of my favorite types of books. Books that have like alternating timelines of like a present day story going on, but then every other chapter flashes back to the past, and you're slowly like putting puzzle pieces together to figure out what is happening present day based on what happened in the past. A big inspiration for me was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. That was one of the first romance books I think I read that had that element to it, and I just was floored. I was blown away by it. I thought it was so cool. It was such an interesting reading experience, and it just kept me hooked from the very first page, because every chapter you're like, okay, like, oh crap, I want to know what happens in the past now. Okay, crap, we're back at the present. Now I have to know what happens. It's like makes it so hard to stop reading, and then, you know, slowly seeing everything come together and things that don't make sense present day starting to make sense once you've seen things in the past. Like, it just, it blew me away. It was a whole new world. And since then I've read a bunch of other books that have alternating timelines, and it's just something that I eat up. So I knew when I really like set my sights on writing this book that I was like, okay, I want to write a book that has alternating timelines. That's all I knew, and I just had that in the back of my mind, and I'd kind of been brainstorming for a while. But the big thing with that type of book, right, and I feel like any type of book, is every book really has, you know, a sort of climax to it, if you will. Especially with that type of book, there's always something usually that you're trying to figure out, right? Something that's being hidden from you as the reader, and the whole time you're like, what happened? Especially in a story like People We Meet on Vacation and in When Fate Breaks, like a childhood friends to strangers to lovers story. You know, it's like, what's the thing? What made these two people like not talk for these past few years, and now they're back together, and like, what's going on? So I was trying to brainstorm that for a very long time. I was like, I'm not sure what I would do. I have no idea. And I was quite literally in the shower, and the idea just came to me. And I know that's so annoying, but I don't know. This scene popped into my head, the sort of big aha scene of this book, including like the title reveal and all of that. It just popped into my head, that very basic idea. And once I got that, I jumped out of the shower, I ran to my computer in my towel, and I sat down and I outlined this book. And when I say outlined, I mean that scene, like everything I thought of in the shower, I just wrote really quickly, like in gibberish. Like, it didn't make any sort of sense. It just was all the thoughts that I could get out before I lost them. I wrote it down, and I had that one paragraph and that to work off of, and then I just kind of started building it from there. I was like, okay, these two characters that I came up with, like, what's their thing? What is the history of each of them? Like, and I feel like from there it just kind of built. Like, over the next day or two, I kind of had some very main plot points. Like, I knew what the first chapter was gonna be. I knew how the book was gonna start. I knew what the sort of hook was gonna be. I knew what the big, like, kind of like climax would be. I knew what the kind of like towards the end more climax would be, and I knew the very end. But everything else I didn't really know. So once I had those few things, everything in me wanted to sit and plan and think more about it, but I was like, you know what? No, you just need to start. And I think that was the absolute best decision that I made, because seriously, I just find once you start writing, like, you think you don't know what you're doing and you're like, I don't know where to start, but literally once you just force yourself to start, things will come to you. There's so many things that ended up making their way into this book that I'm like, I don't even remember where that came from or like how I came up with it. I think so much of it is just getting on a roll, and so you have to have like an idea or a map of where you're going, but I think so much of that in-between stuff you can really just fill in, and I think it's just not putting too much pressure on planning is what I'm trying to say, basically. So yeah, I did not write this book from cover to cover at all, and I think that's another big tip. Is in the past, many times I would try to just write a book start to finish, and I thought that was the way to do it, but with this book especially, again, I feel like these tips are very specific to the type of book that I wrote, because that's all I can really tell you. But because this book has like alternating timelines, past and present, I feel like I had to write it very differently than other people would probably write like a normal book. But for me, I wrote the first chapter first. I knew how it started and that's what I wrote. I obviously had like a bunch of that climax chapter, like I said, already kind of outlined, but didn't write it just yet because I just knew I wasn't ready to write it. I started to kind of go in chronological order of like the present day timeline, but I just felt personally, I was like, okay, I don't feel like I know these characters yet. So I kind of abandoned that and I was like, I'm going to write all the past chapters first. So wrote the first chapter and then I wrote the past chapters because I felt like I needed to personally grow up with the characters before I could understand how they would act present day, and that was so helpful. So if you are wanting to write a book with alternating timelines, I 100% recommend doing that as well. So I had all my past chapters done and then I actually wrote the end. I wrote that big climax chapter that I keep referring to because I feel like it's really like in a lot of ways the most important part of the book. And then I kind of wrote the ending. And then from there, I filled everything else in. And to you, that might sound super chaotic and you might be like, my brain does not work that way. I can never do that. And that is totally fine. But that is just what I found personally worked for me. And I think really taking the pressure off of making yourself write a book, like start to finish, it just makes the process move along. Because if you get a block, if you like get to a certain part where you're like, I just don't know what's supposed to happen here, like you keep going back and forth, like you keep starting to write and then you erase it, like that's a good way to just burn yourself out and you will never finish the book. You need to just, if there's parts that you know you want to include, if there's like certain scenes, like literally it can be as small as like a certain scene, a certain moment, write what you know, write what you already know, and all the other gaps will fill in. Like I promise you'll figure it out and it will all make sense. Like there were so many times where this book was just like chunks, like it was like 3 present day chapters, like a bunch of past chapters that were just alternating the end. Like it looked like it was never gonna come together. I had sticky notes plastered all over my apartment, all over my desk for the longest time because I was trying to, you know, figure out like how things would be revealed, past and present, like keeping track of what's been revealed and rearranging sticky notes and just writing notes everywhere. It was a lot of chaos, but in the end, it just all came together. So that's sort of what I would say. Big tip, don't feel like you have to write it cover to cover. Also a tip that I would say going along with that is you don't have to write an entire chapter start to finish either. I get really caught up. I'm such a like perfectionist and I have a hard time just outlining in general. Like I've never been good at planning. I always hated in school whenever we had to write like rough drafts. I'm like, no, I just want to like write it because I'm like, if it isn't perfect, I can't move on. Like I want to write it. And so a lot of times throughout the process of this, I would get so obsessed on like every word being perfect, like every paragraph, if a sentence didn't really make sense, like I couldn't get past it and move to the next sentence until I made that sentence exactly what I wanted it to be. And as hard as it is, you gotta like train yourself not to do that because there's so many chapters in this book where I'd have an idea, but I'd get so caught up in like making every sentence perfect that it takes a long time. And then you like have been spending hours and you're like, I haven't even gotten like 2 pages into this chapter. So I think it's really helpful to rough write your chapters if you can. Literally, I wrote a lot of things in like bullet point form, like no quotations, no punctuation, just even if it's just a few paragraphs, if you just know like how a dialogue is gonna go, basically just like keyboard smash, write as much as you can, and then you can go back and fill in everything else and make it pretty. If you're not getting my gist so far, my main theme of what I've learned throughout this process is it does not need to be perfect right away, and you can always go back and continue to edit, continue to add. The biggest freaking thing is just getting words on the page because you can always edit and you can always add, you can always take away, but you can't like create the story if there's nothing there. So just starting and getting it on the paper and letting your thoughts come and not putting too much pressure on planning it all. Does that all make sense? That was such a ramble, I'm so sorry. Okay, now aside from like the physical writing of the book, I want to talk about the atmosphere and the technical aspects, I guess, of writing. I wrote my book on Google Docs. There are lots of ways to write your book, and I think I've gotten so many questions about that, like, where have you written it? You can literally do it anywhere, especially if you're planning on self-publishing. Even if you're not, like, you can always, like, I was so stressed about how am I gonna compile this all at the end, like, how is this gonna be one document, how am I gonna figure it out? You'll figure it out. It's not that hard. Seriously, what's most important is writing in a way that is comfortable to you, makes sense to you, is easy on your brain. And so what I personally did is I wrote my entire book on Google Drive in Google Docs. And because again, I had alternating timelines, I had like a folder that had everything for my book in it, and I had 2 folders within that for present day and past. And so every chapter for me was a separate Google Doc. I couldn't have everything in one document because scrolling back and forth would drive me insane. It was just easier for my brain to kind of separate things out. So I would label my chapters by, you know, the number, and then I would do a slash, and then because my chapters didn't actually have names, they're just like the number, and then if it's present day or however many years ago the flashback is. But to keep my brain sane, and so I knew what I was looking at, I would name it like chapter 2, like baseball game, or like Boston trip, just a brief description that tells you like what the chapter is about, so that you can easily like look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's what that was. So that's how I personally did it. I really loved Google Docs for writing. It honestly, like, I figured you had to do it in Word. You do not. Like, Google Docs has all the same capabilities of doing like heading fonts and all of that, and then you can just copy and paste it all into one big Google Doc file, and that's what I ended up using to publish with. I used a software, and I'll talk more about that in my publishing video, but yeah, I used Google Docs and I really loved it, and I'm going to use that forever and seriously recommend it. I know there's other like platforms you can use for this. I think OneNote by Microsoft Word can really accomplish the same thing as well, but I like Google Docs because obviously you can access it on any computer, and I really love it because I can access it on my phone so easily. Like, something that I really loved about that is I had a doc that was in my folder for my overall book that was just like scene ideas or notes, and so I'd be out and about, literally at the store or at work or something, and I might get an idea, like something might come to me, and I love that I could pull up my phone and open the Google Drive app and just get in that document and just jot something down really quick, and then get home, be on my computer, and it's right there and I can reference it. And that just made my life a whole lot easier. If I only had it on Word and it was just not easy to access, I'm sure I'd forget everything. That's a big thing too. Random small tip. If something comes to you, just write it down, because you might think like, oh, I'll remember that later. Like, I'll add that next time I write. You're not gonna remember it. It's gonna be gone. It's gonna fly away. So if you think of anything that could be remotely helpful, just jot it down. If it's on your notes app on your phone, if you decide to use Google Docs and you have that app, just put it somewhere. That's what I say. So I used Google Docs to write. Now you're like, how did you actually manage to make yourself write? A very valid question. For me, I found blocking my time to be super helpful. I have a lot of like hobbies that I do. I mean, I have writing, and then I have reading, and then I have YouTube, and that is like, those are the 3 things that I do outside of work. So I really had to think about and strategize, like, okay, when I get home today, I'm going to read from, you know, 5:30 until 7:30, and then I'm going to write from 7:30 to 10:30, or whatever, like whatever it is. I'm not saying every day was the same thing and that my schedule was always super strict, but like, it required some planning and some thought, especially like with my YouTube channel. I had to tell myself like, okay, you're gonna read this book, so then, you know, you have to set aside time to record and edit your videos. And then my main thing I'm just trying to say is I feel like you have to block out a little bit of time every single day to write, because writing is seriously one of those things where if you stop doing it or you pull away from it, it is so freaking easy to just never go back to it. Like, it's so hard once you like pull away to really get back into the rhythm. But once you're in the rhythm, it is just like, the more you do it, I feel like the easier it is and the easier it comes. Like, every time I would take a break from writing, even now that I'm trying to write other things, like, if you don't try to write for a week and you come back and you're like, okay, like, you spend so much time just like ramping your brain up to start thinking about it and doing it. So even if it's just for like 30 minutes or an hour, I feel like you have to plan some time every single day to write, to really, you know, accomplish something. Obviously, if you have to go on a vacation or something, it happens. Like, you're not gonna be perfect all the time. There's gonna be days that you sit down and you're like, I physically cannot do this. And there are so many days that I did that, where I was just like, this sucks, I'm over it, I wasn't over it, but I'm just like, I can't do this. Like, this is so hard. Like, I don't know what to do. No thoughts, brain empty. And it happens. But even when you think that, I'm telling you, just force yourself to try to write a handful of words, even if you hate it. Just try. Keep on trying. Also, along with blocking my time, I kind of talked about this recently in one of my other videos that was about like tips for being a better reader. And a lot of stuff that I do for reading, I also do for writing. So I talked about in that video how I have to have noise around me to focus on anything. I cannot just read in this complete silence, and I can't write or do any type of work in complete silence either. I have to have something going on. So first of all, a big change that I did was my desk used to be up against a wall. I stared at a wall all the time. When I moved my desk to be in front of my window, it changed my life. Absolutely changed my life. Being able to look out and see things going on, see the sunlight, see the clouds, like it made my brain just like ding, ding, ding. Like it was just, I don't know, something about it. It's stimulating, it's helpful, it's so much better. I also always have an ambiance playing on my TV. This is like a whole rabbit hole, but I have ambiance videos that I play depending on like the time of day, the season. It'll be like a river flowing, or a lot of the times I like to do like city skyline views of like a New York apartment and I'm looking out the window and blah, blah, blah. I like the background sounds. If it's water, if it's, you know, rain. During the winter, I had one where it was like an apartment and it was snowy outside. Like whatever it is, I just like a little noise in the background and I like having that there. And then literally 100% of this book, I shit you not, excuse my French, but was written listening to Taylor Swift instrumentals. I found like a 40-hour playlist or something crazy of all of Taylor Swift's songs in instrumentals, like piano, like acoustic guitar, whatever, but no lyrics, and it was just her music, and it played in the background the entire time I wrote this book. And I think it was a game changer because I needed that extra sound and it helped me so much. And if I had to do it in complete silence, I never would have finished it. So if that doesn't work for your brain, disregard. Do what you want. If you need complete silence, if you need to be completely blocked in and stare at a wall, do what you gotta do. But I feel like experiment with where you try to write. I wrote some stuff, like I would try to write going to places, like I'd go to Starbucks, I'd go to Barnes & Noble, like I did do some of that. I feel like my best work happened alone in my apartment, to be honest, like, but it's good to have a change of scenery. That's a big thing. I feel like if you feel like you have like writer's block or something, or you just are struggling to get ideas out, change your scenery, try to go somewhere. Some people really need people around them like being productive and working to help them work. So Barnes & Noble is a great option if they have a cafe, because a lot of people go there and do their homework and stuff. So I'm not in school anymore, so having those people around me that were also working kind of motivated me to work a little bit. It's just finding what works. And then guys, honestly, from there, you just gotta do it. You gotta try again, hate it, start over. Not the whole thing, but certain chapters, certain scenes. There's gonna be stuff that you're struggling with that's really hard and you feel like you'll never figure it out, you'll never like it, and just trust me, I felt like that a million times and I never thought I was gonna finish it. But it's just about consistency. It's about not giving up. There's so many things that you can do where if you feel stuck, like go to a different chapter. Like there are a couple chapters of this book that were really, really hard for me. Like I spent so much time on them and I had to circle back to them so many different times because I was just struggling. But I promise you, there will be a point where things just click. And if you really are building this story, if you're really focusing on your characters, you know, it all makes sense in the end. And I know that sounds easy to say, and if you're just starting a book and you're like, oh my god, I feel like I will never finish it, I promise you, if you stick with it, if you think about it every single day. A big thing too, oh my gosh, I'm just off the rails rambling. It was so helpful for me to like create a world around my book. I made a little, what is that called? Aesthetic video. You see them all over TikTok where people like flip the book and then you see a bunch of pictures from Pinterest and stuff. I made the aesthetic video for my book probably like less than a month into starting writing it. Like I knew what I was going for and I had to find the pictures, and through doing that, I feel like I learned even more what the aesthetic was, and it just motivated me so much to write the book. Also the cover design, you might think that's something that comes last. I pretty much designed the cover before I even wrote the book. It wasn't perfect, it didn't look like this, but I got on Canva, I started messing around, and I was like, this is what I want my cover to look like. This sort of vibe, this basic idea. And I literally saved that picture of my cover and I made it my wallpaper, my desktop wallpaper on my computer. So every single day I had to look at it and I had to think about, one day you will hold that in your hands. It'll be a real book. And that was so motivating for me to see that all the time. Just imagine it. Like you have to kind of do those things, I feel like sometimes, like where you might think you're getting ahead of yourself, but if it motivates you to continue writing, playlists, the playlist, how could I forget? I started creating a playlist for my book before it even, like literally the day that I came up with the idea, I started thinking of songs. And even as I was just listening to songs, I started to like hear the story in different songs and building a playlist, and I would mess with it. And I literally ended up creating a playlist that was like the story in my book. If you were dying to reread my book for whatever reason and you just didn't want to take the time to read it, I wanted you to be able to go and listen to this playlist, and it's like, there's a story. That's all you needed. Start to finish, you got it. And for me as well, like it just motivated me. I literally listened to my book playlist every day for the entire time I was writing it. Like I still, to this day, my book playlist is pinned on Spotify and I listen to something from it every single day, because it's just, that to me, if you're not a person that's like huge on music, I feel like everybody's huge on music, so maybe that's dumb to say, but if music doesn't like speak to you, maybe it's something else. Like maybe you're like an artist and you want to draw like your fan art, like you want to draw your characters. Like I feel like everybody has a different thing, but for me, the music seriously motivated me to write so much. And there are so many songs where in a lot of ways, like the songs influence the story as much as the story influenced the song choice. Like there would be songs that I would hear that reminded me somewhat of it, but I'm like, oh, like it would inspire me to do something else. Like so many little pieces of Easter eggs of songs on my playlist like made their way into my book, and it's seriously was one of my favorite parts of the entire writing process. Yeah, you just gotta have fun with it. I think that's the big thing at the end of the day. Like, yes, it's a book, and yes, it's hard work. It's the hardest freaking work I've ever done. It's the most tedious thing I've ever done, but it's supposed to be like fun. You're creating a story, dude. You're making a story from your brain. You're putting it on pages that people are gonna read to entertain themselves. Or don't think that way. If that stresses you out, literally go into writing thinking nobody's ever gonna read this. Nobody besides me, and maybe my mother, whoever's closest to you. Like, nobody has to read your book. I think that's another thing to remember. This isn't a writing assignment. You aren't in school. Like nobody's making you write this. You're not getting a grade. Like you are literally creating something that you want to exist. Like you're bringing something into existence that didn't exist before, and it's coming from your brain, and that's so freaking cool. So yeah, I don't know if I answered any questions or made any type of sense, but that was how I wrote my book. Those are the things that helped me. That was a little bit of my process. If you have any more specific questions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. Like I said, I will make an entire video that will probably make a lot more sense and be a lot more like straightforward on the actual process of publishing a book, turning it from a bunch of Google Doc documents to this physical book in my hand. But yeah, that is it for me today. If you haven't read When Fate Breaks yet, link down below. Yeah. This feels like it was a bit of a fever dream, but thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you very soon. Bye.